Michael had come to the cabin to escape. The city was a buzz of noise, lights, and the suffocating press of deadlines. Winter had always been his season. He loved the quiet, the cold, the isolation. The cabin was remote, nestled deep in the woods, a 2-hour drive from the nearest town. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy. It was perfect. As the snow began to fall heavier on the second night of his stay, Michael sat in front of the fire, sipping whiskey and reading a book he hadn't touched in years. Outside, the world was still. The forest around him was blanketed in white, silent and untouched snow. He felt, for the first time in months, a sense of peace. Then the knock came. At first, Michael thought it was just the wind, the trees groaning under the weight of the snow. But here it was again, louder this time. A sharp, purposeful knock. 3 quick raps on the door, followed by a silence that seemed to press against him like a weight. He stood up slowly, his pulse quickening for reasons he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't unusual for someone to get lost in the woods, especially in the winter. Maybe a hiker or a snowboarder. He approached the door cautiously, peering through the small window beside it. No one was there. Confused, Michael opened the door slightly, scanning the white landscape. Nothing moved, just the swirling snow. He stepped outside, calling into the quiet, "Hello!" The woods were silent. The only sound was the distant howl of the wind. Michael frowned. He was about to step back inside when he saw something. A figure, moving at the edge of the trees. A tall man, dressed in heavy winter clothing. But there was something off about his movement. He wasn't walking. He was prowling? Circling the cabin. "Hey!" Michael called out instinctively, locking the door behind him. "What are you doing out there?" The man didn't answer. He just continued to move, his eyes fixed on the cabin, his face obscured by the hood of his coat. Michael felt a flicker of unease worm its way into his gut. "Hey," I said. Michael started, but before he could finish, the man vanished into the snow, disappearing into the trees as though he were a part of them. One moment he was there, and the next gone. Michael didn't know what to think. He hadn't been out here long enough to get a sense of the area. Maybe there was a trail. Maybe someone else was out there. But there was something unsettling about the man's presence, something that made the air feel colder, heavier. Michael stepped back inside and locked the door behind him. He sat by the fire for the rest of the night, trying to shake the feeling of being watched, but sleep never came. The next morning, the storm had cleared, but the sky remained overcast. Michael decided to check around the cabin, maybe see if he could find any tracks in the snow. As he walked around the back of the cabin, his foot brushed something hard beneath the snow. He knelt down and uncovered what looked like a large, weathered rock. But when he cleared more of the snow, he realized it was a knife. A hunting knife. Its edge was chipped, its handle worn smooth with age. A chill ran down Michael's spine. He stood up quickly, his eyes scanning the woods around him. Had the man left it, or had someone else? He didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone. He spent the rest of the day pacing inside, checking the windows, listening for sounds in the distance. By late afternoon, he could no longer ignore the pounding in his chest. He had to leave. But as he packed his bag, the wind picked up again. The faintest knock echoed through the cabin. Michael froze. This time it was louder, more forceful. He wasn't imagining it. The door. The knocking was coming from the door. He moved toward it, heart hammering in his ears, his thoughts swirling. He glanced out the window. The woods were empty. No one was there. He opened the door, only to find nothing. Then he heard it, a voice, deep, cold, almost like a growl. "You can't leave." Michael spun around, his breath catching in his throat. The man was there, standing at the threshold, his figure nearly blending in with the shadows cast by the storm clouds outside. His eyes were dark, hollow pits, and his face was gaunt, almost skeletal. The way he stood, rigid, like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike, made Michael's pulse spike. "Who the hell are you?" Michael demanded, his voice shaking despite his best effort to stay calm. "What do you want?" The man didn't answer. He just stepped forward, slowly, as if savoring Michael's fear. His cold, dead eyes locked onto Michael's, and in that moment, Michael knew this was no ordinary man. The door slammed shut as if pushed by an invisible hand. Michael was thrown back, his breath knocked out of him. When he scrambled to his feet, the man was gone again, but the air felt thick with danger. Michael had no choice. He grabbed his coat, his pack, and bolted for the back door, ignoring the nagging feeling that this would only make things worse. He ran into the woods, the snow biting at his exposed skin, the wind howling in his ears. Behind him, the trees seemed to close in, the shadows stretching longer with each passing step. His heart raced as he pushed himself harder, faster, the sound of his boots crunching in the snow, the only thing keeping him grounded. He couldn't look back. He knew somehow that if he did, the man would be there, just beyond his sight, waiting to pounce. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Michael wasn't sure. His lungs burned, his legs screamed in protest, but he couldn't stop. The snow had picked up again, the storm relentless. He stumbled, tripping over hidden roots, but still he pressed on, and then he heard it. The snap of a twig, the soft crunch of boots in the snow. The man was behind him. Michael's blood ran cold as he realized how close the figure was. His breath was coming in ragged gasps, but he forced himself to move faster. He was almost at the ridge. If he could just make it to the cliff, maybe he could. A hand grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back. Michael twisted violently, breaking free, and launched himself forward, but it was too late. The world around him seemed to collapse in on itself as he fell, the ground giving way beneath his feet. He screamed as he tumbled down into the darkness. When Michael awoke, it was to silence. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious, but the storm had passed. The sky was clear, and the moonlight bathed the snow in an eerie glow. There was no sign of the man, no sign of anything, really. Michael staggered to his feet, blood trickling down his forehead, his limbs stiff from the cold. He was alone. Had he escaped? Or had the man let him go? The answer felt irrelevant. He didn't know where to go. The woods around him stretched endlessly in the trees, silent sentinels in the dark. And in that silence, he heard it again, the soft crunch of footsteps in the snow, drawing closer. Michael turned, but the figure was gone. The woods seemed to hold their breath, waiting for him to move. And as Michael stepped forward, the question remained, was he truly free, or had the hunt only just begun? The end. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel and tune in again for the next installment.